This conference will now be recorded.
I'm very proud of myself for remembering that.
I had my finger hovering for when you were ready to start.
Thank you, Maya.
Hey Gary, real fast. I'm using the web browser. I still have to download the app or get permission to through my IT folks. Um, I don't see the button when I'm ready to share my screen. Where to do that?
I think I get to.
Oh, I see it. Okay,
Okay.
sorry. I answered my own question. It's grayed out. I got you.
Yeah, I can probably just we can hand it over to you.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Sure.
Do you know, fun fact, that if you try to log on too early, that it says that you've got the wrong meeting ID? That meeting doesn't exist? Fun
Well,
fact.
technically, is that Jessica? Technically, up until about half an hour ago, the meeting did not exist because apparently it was put in the trash after the first meeting, and so I had to recreate it on the fly.
Well, some of us have time zone issues, even though we've been in the Eastern time zone for years now. And so I had it on my calendar for 12:30 and I went in and I was like, huh, that's a problem. And I was like, oh, 1:30, okay.
Yeah, but you made it.
I did.
Okay, let's go ahead and get going. Thank you all so much for coming to the second meeting of the Tampa Bay Habitat Restoration Consortium. I'm Gary Rollerson, the ecologist for the estuary program and the liaison for the HRC as well. You know, we've already got a good spread of people on the call. I'm not going to do an introduction this time, but it looks like I know we've got federal, local, nonprofit representatives. Much appreciated for all of you all coming here to talk about this. We've got a pretty robust agenda for the day. I'm going to kick it off by talking about some of the operational ideas that we discussed at the last meeting and how we're going to move forward with those and what kind of formatting we want for the consortium. And then Marcus is going to talk about the how some of the open science work he's been doing with the Habitat Master Plan over the last several months to be able to do reporting going forward. And then Chris Kaufman from NOAA will be talking about a hydrologic restoration database that she's been compiling for the Tampa Bay region and asking for input and information on that. So are there any questions before I get going? Right, hearing none. So again, this Habitat Restoration Consortium was first expressed as a need within the Habitat Master Plan update that ESA worked created for the estuary program published last year. We are going to just discuss real quick what happened during the December meeting. Trying to understand, recap the purpose of the Restoration Consortium, what we talked about at that point, what we're trying to accomplish through this group. There has been a roles and responsibilities document out there. I'll go over some of that and see if we've do a quick gut check and see if we're comfortable with what is going on within that document as for our operations, and then think about the operating structure. Do we and we'll just talk about how we're going to move forward and plan for the upcoming meetings and all that that nitty-gritty sort of administrative stuff. So we had a very robust conversation, formal and non-formal, about the objectives of the Habitat Consortium during that first meeting. First and foremost, it is implementation of the Habitat Master Plan. And this includes, providing that habitat, providing a habitat for a framework for coordination of habitat restoration, the sharing of technical information, trying to create multiple new partnerships. And again, very glad that we have multiple organizations and from several walks of life on the phone, on the video with us. Talk about some watershed level planning, use identification within ourselves of potential projects and sharing of funding sources as those come available, reviewing of potential restoration projects for consistency with the comprehensive management plan and the Habitat Master Plan, and then also helping to report on annual progress towards management of our habitats. Also during the December meeting, we talked about the other members that organizations or groups that may be missing. We've done some outreach to the universities, and the ports have been invited. That was one of the groups that was identified. I need to do some work with the agricultural landowners to see if we can get some of those folks to the table. And I think we have, but we do have a pretty robust cross section of folks that would be interested and valued for the habitat restoration groups. And we had a brief discussion about barriers to participation. I mean, mainly it was time that was, time is an issue. We're all recognize the value of being able to be in multiple places at one time. They were trying to make sure that your time here is well spent, that you and your supervisors understand why we're doing this, what the reasons are for the Restoration Consortium. And then we also conducted an activity to rate the different activities for the Habitat Restoration Consortium. And those top about 5 were the top 6 are what I believe we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of years within the HRC. And again, I was talking a little bit about these during the purpose, ranking identification of priority restoration sites, again, lessons learned, sharing information, looking for additional funding, restoration targets on watershed and basin levels, tracking the progress towards habitat restoration targets. And one of the things I'll mention a couple of times today is the Government Performance Results Act that many of you have assisted with in the past, and that is coming around again in a matter of months. And then I think the final thing that we can do a good job of focusing on without getting too scattered is the reviews of those projects for consistency with the Habitat Master Plan and the CCMP. And feel free to throw questions in the chat, or go ahead and let me know if you have any comments at any time during the discussion. And again, continuing on for the 12-9 recap, we were discussing those watershed level linkages, trying to understand pre-planning for projects. If folks had some exciting ideas that they wanted to bring to the group, definitely let us know those. We started to talk about some of the the potential ways to set up the consortium. There was comparisons with the nitrogen management consortium, also some comparisons with the TAC. We need to make sure that again, looking at project consistency within the CCMP and the Habitat Master Plan, and look at that regular reporting of status and trends of our habitats. Now, there has been this member roles and responsibilities document. The link is here at the bottom, and hopefully if y'all have had a chance to have a look at that. The way it's set up right now is we're talking about the Restoration Consortium being a subcommittee of the TAC, and similar to the TAC, have an ad hoc membership, open standing invitations. Again, our primary focus is the implementation of the Habitat Master Plan, and we would ask our members to do their diligence in preparation for these different. Thank you. It looks like Maya just put the link to the document in the chat. Participate as much as possible. In virtual forums sometime soon. We may be going back to real life, and that would just be crazy, but we're looking forward to it. Contribute to these data collection efforts, such as the GIPRA, to help us understand what the habitats are, what's happening to the habitats in the within Tampa Bay. And then also something that's pretty critical is ensuring that as an organization, we're not supporting or opposing specific projects. And this is based on language that is in our interlocal agreement between the multiple municipalities. So we can do findings of fact that would feed up to the TAC as requested, and then they would be making statements to the management and policy boards. Any questions along those lines right now about what I've covered? Okay. And yeah, for the estuary program, we would be right now I'm the primary point of contact for the Restoration Consortium, and help to coordinate communications with and through everybody, recruiting of partners, organizing the meetings, helping to develop the agendas, and working to train and do capacity building. If we, during these discussions, say we need some sort of restoration class in the region, more than happy to help get that ball rolling and do some organization there as well. So now thinking about the operating structure, we've got a couple of different options. Of course, the default right now, we have been thinking about making this similar to the technical advisory committee, where there are co-chairs that are elected by y'all. They basically serve an indeterminate term, and then they would help set the agendas, etc. Another option is sort of a board style, where you have 5 to 7 folks on a committee of the committee, essentially, that would be helping to lead that. It can be led by staff, and we're looking for other options as well. But right now, if you could take a minute, I think Maya's putting into the chat a menti.com code. And I'd just like to check the temperature of the room and see what your interest is in each of these different operating structure options. And we're starting with just a sort of a testing. I want to make sure that it's working. Yep, so we're starting to see some folks putting into the Wordle. I like the fact that somebody says all of them, refuses to play favorites. Okay. It's like we're slowing down and we're pretty close to the number of folks we have in the room. Okay, so we'll go ahead and try to switch to the question. Here we go. So just a basic multiple choice. What do you think the structure of the restoration consortium should be? Okay, it looks like the numbers, oh, somebody else just popped in. We'll give it about 20 more seconds or so. Okay, I'll go ahead and close. But thank you for the information. Does anybody, it's right now looking fairly strongly for the led by the co-chairs or the chairs. Does anybody have any strong reservations against that or would like to speak for one of the other options? Definitely appreciate any input y'all have.
When you say a board style, does that mean like policy board where it's representatives from the
No, but I guess more of a like we'd basically have almost a small committee that would instead of a couple of co-chairs, it would be more like a group of 5 or 7 of y'all who would be working on these the creations of the agenda and talking about that.
Hey Gary, this is Tom. I think the chair co-chair structure matches all of the other committees at the estuary program, and for consistency, I think that's a good way to go.
Thank you, Tom.
For one of, this is Jessica, and I had voted for one of the other options, but I think that's a great point that Tom raised. So I'll switch to chair co-chair.
Okay. Any other discussion? Strong feelings one way or the other? Okay. We will. So right now we'll be working under that co-chair.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Maya.
So how will you accept nominations? When will you be looking to do that then?
That's on my next slide. I think it's on one of my next slides. Yeah, it's on, oh, okay. It's on my, I think one of my next slides. Okay, but thinking about so part of your homework for the next little while will be suggesting people for those co-chair positions, whether you would like to self-nominate or whether you have a colleague in mind that you think would be a really good fit for this. I think what I would like to do is at the next meeting make those elections. Unless we, yeah, I think that would just be the easiest option. Is we'll present those early in the meeting and then have some discussions about what we would like, how we would like to see that occur. But so thinking about if you want to put yourself in one of these roles, or if you have a friend you would like to volunteer, you know, they would be working with estuary program staff to help identify, suggest relevant topics for discussion during these meetings, review the agendas, and working. One of Kelly Levy's big pushes for the TAC for the last year has been bring a friend. You know, so recruiting and retaining members on this in this subcommittee, leading the meetings like Kelly and Aaron do for the TAC, and then also ensuring member participation, making sure that we hear all voices in it, and it's not dominated by one or two folks. So your homework for the next several weeks. Again, our next meeting is, I believe, September 1st. But I'd like to ask for a final review of the roles and responsibilities document by June 1st. I've had some good input already, and I really appreciate that. And so I'm thinking about if you could get your final comments in within 2 weeks, and we'll put that to rest. And then also, if you could identify some potential co-chairs for this group, that would be greatly appreciated. And again, whether that's yourself or a colleague that in the restoration or management field that would benefit from serving in that capacity and helping this group while they're serving in that capacity, be much appreciated. So that's all I have for now. Any questions before I turn it over to Marcus? All right, hearing none. It's all yours, Marcus. Thank you all so much.
Get situated here. All right, how's that? Super.
That's good.
So, I'm really excited to talk about this today. This has been a project that I've kind of procrastinated on for a few months, but finally decided to bite the bullet and dive into it. I'm really happy to hear that the HMPU is, of course, a tremendous and important part of this consortium, and you know, it's a great document, and it's something that is going to guide the actions of this group for a long time. And it was published about a year ago, and since it was published, we've had conversations internally about how do we sort of operationalize this product. It provides us with a method. It provides us with ways to identify where habitat restoration protection could occur, but it is essentially a static product in the sense that you know, we have a way to create these numbers, but not with specific tools that we can operationalize using reproducible workflows every time we get an updated data set that's used to create those tables and maps. So that's really what this effort has been all about. You know, making sure that we can rapidly reproduce those numbers so that when data updates do come along, we can quickly turn it around and see how well we're doing towards meeting our goals, and also, more importantly, be responsive to our partners in sort of informing them where they can sort of target these opportunity areas for restoration, because we want to provide that as a resource coming out of this this workflow around the HMPU. So I have a few goals today. I don't have incredibly too much to talk about, but I do have a few points I want to get across. First and foremost, I think it always is a good idea to sort of revisit what the HMPU is all about. It's a great resource, but there's a lot of content there. And so I think it's always important to sort of step back and take a very high level sort of 30,000 foot approach on what this document does for us. Not only what it does, but why it's created and how the tables and maps were produced to understand what we can do with them moving forward. So I'll spend a few minutes revisiting that. Apologies if you've heard that about 20 times, but again, it never hurts to revisit that. And then I want to talk about why we need to operationalize this. So as I said before, the product we got from ESA was a great thing that's going to guide us for many years, but essentially we need to operationalize that. So I want to hit on some of the reasons why we needed to do this and use that as sort of context for this workflow we created that we can update routinely, and also talk about some of the products that have come out of this operationalizing of the HMPU that you all and our partners can use to inform restoration projects. And then finally, I just want to hit on a few things that perhaps this group could consider for, I guess, kind of lingering needs for data management of either products or data sources that feed the HMPU workflow or things coming out of it. So I just want to bring that to the attention of the group so we can have a discussion around that, or just sort of plant the seed of thinking about how we can really take this whole process above and beyond what its original intent was. All right, so a little HMPU background. Again, this document, we as a program update this plan about every 10 years or so. And so this iteration that was published last year was really revolving around this whole concept called maximizing the potential. And if you're familiar with the past habitat management plan documents, that's sort of a shift in a paradigm of how we think about managing habitats in the watershed. The old paradigm was restoring the balance, and we're still kind of borrowing that concept of sort of thinking about the pieces of the pie and how do we sort of allocate efforts towards the different ratios of the different habitat types. But we want to take this to the next level to reflect new ways of thinking about how we can approach habitat management, but also take advantage of the existing data sets that we have out there to create a more sort of spatially explicit design that is both sort of retrospective, looking at past status or past trends, looking at current status, and looking forward, taking into account what we know could happen to these landscapes or these habitats in the future, given known pressures that are occurring due to sea level rise and coastal squeeze and all that fun stuff. So this document that again focuses around this paradigm really does sort of do this deep dive looking at what's the current status of native habitats in our watershed, what has been the trends in the last 20, 30 years of data that we have looking at this, and uses that to just sort of take an inventory and develop that context of where are these opportunity areas we should target for protection or conservation or restoration, given past trends and given what we can sort of expect with ongoing and persistent stressors to habitat loss, whether it be development or sea level rise or other things. So that's the document in summary, again, taking that very high level approach, but a really important product coming out of this was this concept of restoration potential. So, once we sort of take a stock of what the status and trends are in these different habitat types, we can identify opportunity areas that we can target for conservation or different restoration projects. And sort of knowing where those areas are is important, but also knowing what type of native habitat we could shoot for when we're doing a restoration project is also really important. So you might have like, something in the LULC layer that's classified as agricultural lands or fallow lands that could have good restoration potential for native uplands or something like that. And so we wanted to identify what those potentials are in these so-called restorable habitats. And that essentially involved this desktop GIS exercise of looking at, where the existing protected or proposed conservation layers are, what types of soils are they at, are they, near coastal boundary or upland, and all that. So sort of through that combined effort, we were able to identify these restoration potential areas and what sort of targets you could be shooting for if you were to pursue a type of restoration project. And so the document itself is about 200 plus pages, but the tidbits of information that we could focus on as sort of targets are several tables and maps that many of them are highlighted in the executive summary, but also scattered throughout the document. And I just want to show you these ones as tables you've probably seen already many times, but just to remind you what they're trying to show you. So this is table 5.3, I believe. And this is, again, that just sort of inventory of where we're at right now at this point in time with the data sets that we have available to us. So these are all the relevant native habitats in our watershed broken up into different strata. So subtidal in the bay itself, intertidal along the coastal margin, and then supertidal, sort of more the upland habitats. And so this is the current extent to our best estimate with the data that we have, and then sort of overlaying that current extent with known conservation lands that already exist or that are proposed to be conservation lands, and then finally identifying these other opportunities that are habitats that aren't quite yet this native potential or native habitat type yet, but areas that could be restored to meet this particular habitat type. And so we have these restoration habitats broken down by relative opportunities here. That is maybe what you could be shooting for. So again, this table is really important because it tells us how much we currently have and how much of these opportunities currently exist within the entire watershed. And then we have this other table that is, I think, the other most important table in this document that tells us how far we could go given where we know where we're starting from. And so this is a breakdown of our targets that we're trying to shoot for, knowing that this is how much we have at this point in time. And of course, this is being informed by past trajectories of where we think these different habitat categories are going, what the previous trends have been, where are the different relative risk categories for the different habitats based on past trends. And so we have, of course, again, this isn't the whole table, by the way, this is only what I could fit on the screen, but we have this current extent that's the same as from the previous table. Then we have this total restoration opportunity, which is where how much we could sort of convert to these different habitats if we, in a best case scenario, we're able to do that given the resources available to us. And then given past trends, what are reasonable targets we could strive for at a 2030 level, so about 10 years from now, or even a 2050 level about 30 years from now. And so some of this is just hold the line, and others are sort of more aggressive based on what we think we could achieve given past trends. And then again, as I said, another really important part of this document that does kind of represent a shift from past habitat master plans is these spatially explicit products that tell you where these things actually exist in terms of what your opportunity layers are, in terms of what's existing conservation or proposed conservation, and where you should focus reservation given sort of coastal squeeze issues, that sort of thing. And then moving sort of a next step beyond that, what sort of restoration type could you strive for if you were to pursue a project in these different opportunity layers? So these are, again, two of several dozen maps in this document, but I see them as being two of the most important spatial products coming out of this. And these are maps created with spatial data that we can provide as requested to sort of say, this is where you could look, this is the type of habitat you should try to shoot for. So that's the HMPU in a nutshell. How'd I do on that, Gary? Good, okay. It's again a very dense document, but I'm trying to sort of distill it down into ways that make sense from an actionable perspective of how we can use these products. So again, just to remind everyone what this document provides. I mean, obviously the elephant in the room is development pressures, given that we know that the population in our watershed is increasing, and of course, development can outpace our efforts to pursue conservation, restoration, protection activities for native habitats, and also considering ever-present stressors of sea level rise and how that can sort of squeeze out important habitats in that intertidal area that we want to think about as maybe prioritizing given their sensitivity to these different stressors. And so this HMPU really gives us our marching orders, hence I believe the purpose of this consortium. So it tells us how much we currently have and at what rate is that changing. So that's our sort of retrospective context for moving forward. And then given that information, we can identify what are appropriate targets that could be reasonably achieved in the next 10 years or 30 years, given past trends. And then sort of putting the rubber or the tires to the road or whatever, where do these current opportunities exist as a means to actually go out and do some boots on the ground work to actually pursue these opportunities, and what types of habitats should you shoot for given the restoration potential around these opportunities. So again, a great product, but we want to essentially operationalize this. Again, as I said, what we received last year, our deliverable from ESA, tells us how to do it, gives us a method, but it's maybe like 90% of the way there. We essentially had to sort of take those tools and reproduce the analysis, the workflow, taking all of the input data sets to try to make sure that we not only understand the process, but we can reproduce that process so that when, as this first challenge indicates, when source data are updated, we can update our estimates of current acreage of the different habitat types and provide that as a means to assess progress towards different targets. So this is our first challenge. We know that land use, land cover layers are going to be routinely updated. We want to be able to take that information and sort of ingest it in a way to say that, okay, we've done a good job in the last 2 to 3 years, given that we know this is what we were shooting for. We want to be able to assess how well we've done this in a way that is true to the method in the actual document. The second challenge is that all of the summaries that are in that current document are at a watershed level. And we know that institutions that could pursue restoration projects don't necessarily have jurisdiction in the entire watershed. So we want to provide spatially explicit summaries that are relevant to our partners. So we wanted to provide summaries by municipal boundaries or county boundaries, for example, because we know these are our partners that can actually make those decisions, and we want to give them context from the HMPO that's relevant for their interests. And more importantly, when they request that information from us, we want to be able to provide it to them in a timely manner. So if, say, we get City of St. Pete asking us, hey, what are the numbers for the City of St. Pete? We want to say, boom, it's right here, it's online. Here you go, as opposed to us just sort of, hey, okay, well, let me fuddle with some GIS layers and try to get it on my end and make sure it's right, and then send it to you. And so that's an important service that we try to provide at the estuary program, is that we can give you information that's important and reflects the data where it's at in its current state. So that was the second challenge, and of course, really the largest issue that encapsulates these other challenges is that we want to be able to use these tools to assess progress each year. And so I envision, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we'll be reporting to this consortium that, we'll show you updated tables that tell us how well we're doing towards achieving our goals that have been laid out in the HMPU, and then that will inform what happens moving forward. And so that was sort of the major impetus for all of this. So then began the, arduous process of trying to reproduce all of the steps that went into the final products that came out of the HMPU. And, it's not that the document itself was missing information, it's just that it laid out a plan for us, and we wanted to make sure that we had an understanding of that process, and we could drop in new data layers when they came available so that we could update that information. And so I actually, if you've heard me talk about open science before in the past, I do a lot of software development. I use open source software to do this, and I try to put everything online so that the process is exposed and people can understand it and appreciate that way, and also use these online platforms to put forth some of these more specific products that could inform where these restoration projects could occur. So what this link is showing you here is essentially a link to a repository on GitHub, which is a code sharing platform that many people use, but it's something we use at the Estuary program to put up a lot of our open science projects. And so I have a particular repository for the HMPU that essentially has a bunch of analysis code that literally reproduces all of the steps in the HMPU to go from raw data, geoprocessing, to the tables and maps that you see in that document. And so this is what took a long time, and this is why I was procrastinating and doing this initially, but now I think we actually have this in a way, set up in a way that when we get new data, we can just drop it in, run the code, and give that information in a timely manner to whoever needs it. And so, long story short, this was essentially the entire, geoprocessing workflow, going from source data to get all those tallies, the opportunity areas, the restoration potential areas, and now that's all available and automated through this code workflow here online. And on top of that, we've also sort of re-implemented this workflow, not just at the watershed level as it's already provided in the HMPU, but by jurisdiction or city boundaries. So we have the city and county breakdown of these tables and maps created through this entire workflow, and we have those products available online, which I'll show you in a second. So the products that do exist now online that have been operationalized through this workflow, I want to go through a few of them just so you can see what it looks like. These are going to be the things that are forward-facing that our partners can use to go forth and do great things with habitat restoration. The first thing I wanted to talk about was an analysis of land use trends going back from now till about 1990, essentially the earliest year we have of land use assessments at a level of detail sufficient enough to do this trends analysis. And so I believe one of the early chapters in the HMPU already goes through this, but we thought it would be really valuable to have a similar analysis available online because we already have, going through this process, we downloaded all of the land use land cover layers, and we wanted to basically, provide that in a way, that trend analysis in a way that was, informative and interactive as per the usual for a lot of our open science products. So I want to just bring that to your attention. If you go to this web page, you'll see basically just a summary of all of the land use categories, the native habitats that we have in the HMPU that we have targets for, and these are going to be the ones that are super tidal or intertidal, and then we have one by subtidal because these are different source layers and the years don't necessarily match up in time, but they are separated and you can see the trends by those strata individually. But this is interactive, and so you can basically say, I want to look at what have the trends been from 1990 to present day. And so the most recent layer we have is 2017. This is the one that the HMPU was built on. So you can look at that and you can say, these are the tallies, going from 1990 to 2017. This is the total change in the habitat, percent change. And of course you could, change whatever year you want to look at. So now we're showing 2007 to 2017, even 2014, 2017. That's all fun. So that's a tabular summary, and you could also do a graphical summary. And so I think, Gary's probably shown similar graphics like these before, but this is showing us basically the major categories, looking at 1990 categories. So the size of the bar is like how much acreage was estimated in 1990. and then we have current estimates on the right. And so this is a proper change analysis where you can look at where the different categories came from and went to between the two pairs of interest, the 2-year pairs of interest. And so first and foremost, it's like, okay, well, development category increased a lot. I mean, we all know that's occurring, but that should be kind of alarming too, and really sort of motivate us to sort of pursue these restoration projects with haste, I suppose. What's also interesting is that you can see these restorable habitats, and this is where that restoration potential comes into play as a product coming out of the HMPU. These restorable habitats are opportunities for pursuing projects are diminishing over time. So like there's this huge category, like 100,000 acres going right into the developed category. And this is really, I think, the motivation for what we're trying to do with this consortium is that we're losing these opportunities, and we should go forth and do restoration. And these graphics provide us a way to really kind of visualize how these changes have been occurring. And then we have finally this change analysis table looking at different pairs of categories and how many acreages went to and from between the different years as additional context. So again, that is all information that already kind of exists in a similar form in the HMPU document, but now we're sort of serving it up in a way that is hopefully interactive and accessible. Am I still sharing my full screen, or did that sort of go away? Hold on. Present. Sorry about that. Okay. And so the next product is the maps. And so actually the tables in the maps. As I mentioned, the HMPU is a static document where the results were kind of presented at the watershed level. And so we first wanted to step back and say, how do we develop a workflow to update these maps and make sure they're current given the current data that we have? And also, how do we serve up this information that's relative to our partners? And so we have tabular assessments, mapped assessments for the whole watershed, but then we also have the results broken down by city boundaries and county boundaries. And so these are our opportunity areas. I'm actually just gonna go over to the repository. So if you go to the repository, you can actually see links to all of this information. And so we have the opportunity assessment analysis. So that last slide that I showed you, the maps and tables are for that analysis. And so you can click on results for an individual area of interest that you care about. So here's like the whole watershed. This will look familiar. This is table, or rather map 5.3, I think, in the HMPU document. Similarly, you can look at a tabular summary of that same information. But again, just to reiterate, we can break it down by boundaries. So I'm going to go to Hillsborough County. So here's a map of these opportunity areas for Hillsborough County as it currently exists. And similarly, a tabular assessment for that same area. And so we get requests for this information, and now we have it available online, and it is again reflecting the current state of the data that we have to feed that information. So that's all online. The other piece of information we have is this restoration potential. So those previous maps and tables were just the opportunities where they exist, but we also have this concept of, if you are going to go out and do a restoration project, what is a potential habitat type you could shoot for, given the restoration type that you see in the landscape. So we have assessments for the entire watershed, and then broken down by jurisdiction. Now, we don't have a tabular product for this because the same information exists in the previous tables here, so I didn't want to duplicate that there. But nonetheless, you can still access these maps and sort of see where those areas are as well. And also, for all of these, we do have, it's not just the JPEG maps that we put out there. We also have the spatial layers available on request, the actual shape files that you can look at if you want to see them as well. And these are all, those shapefiles are created through this workflow in an automated fashion. And then finally, the targets table that I was talking about. So this is also linked online, again, showing the current state and what we could shoot for given the current trends and what we could reasonably achieve in 10 and 30 years. And so right now, this kind of reflects what's in the document. But again, when we get updated land use layers every year or every 3 years, or updated conservation layers, we can drop that into this entire workflow and update this table on the fly to see how well we're doing in meeting these goals. And that's kind of the whole impetus for all of this. So I've kind of been emphasizing this a lot. Why do we want to operationalize this? So I just want to drive home that point that what you're seeing now, it does look exactly like what's in the HMPU, but how those results are created is the important part. So those results are always going to be as current as the source data that are available to us. So the conservation layers, land use layers, the subtitle layers, all of that feeds into this process and is creating those products on the fly. So anytime any of the things get updated, we can run the analysis and you'll see what you see on there is going to reflect that current data. So the products themselves aren't isolated from the actual process used to create them. I hope that part is pretty clear. And the other value of this is that we've broken this down by different jurisdictions or municipalities that can actually make these decisions within their boundaries. So it's contextualized that way. I just, realize I've been talking a lot, but I want to just close on a few things that I think are important needs moving forward. Operationalizing this was a big step, I think, in terms of how we can use this as a tool every year from now moving forward. But there are some gaps that I want to bring to everyone's attention as things that we could talk about or think about through this consortium of potential challenges that really make this prevent it from being fully operationalized. And one of these things is the existing conservation layers come from the Florida Natural Areas Inventory, and these layers actually feed the opportunities map or the opportunities table. And if you've read the HMPU, you'll see that there was some considerable work working with our partners to actually identify gaps in those conservation layers. So partner projects that weren't in that database. And so there was kind of some manual additions to the source layer that are somewhat documented in the HMPU, but we can do a much better job of incorporating our partner projects into this workflow so that we're not doing a lot of backtracking and trying to contact different individuals to find out where these things actually exist on the landscape. So working towards centralized databases, I think, is a big part of this. GIPRA, for example, what Chris is going to talk about, for example, that's a step in the right direction. And I just want to bring that to everyone's attention that this is a limitation of this, is that we need to be really careful with tracking these projects moving forward. Other issues, so the proposed conservation projects, this is sort of a separate category from existing conservation products. This was based off of a data product that I believe was like a one-off thing that was created. And so I really don't know how that's going to be updated. So we might have a conversation around that. And then something that also might be a bit of a challenge is, we as a group or our partners, we are reporting on restoration projects. I realize this might be a challenge in some cases, but it would be really great to have an actual spatial data describing the extent of a project. Knowing when and where a project occurs, how much acreage was restored is a great start, but actually having a spatial layer with that information is critical to feeding this entire workflow, going from source data to maps and tables, because it is a spatially explicit process. And without the spatial data, it's really challenging for us to update those tables in kind. So I just want to make a plea for that and also just make everybody aware that that is something that is important. Other needs, the district layers that feed this are a big part of this. They're obviously a great resource. They allow us for excellent continuity from 1990 to now in terms of what's happening with land use change. But there are periodic updates to the existing products online, whether we see an error or someone reports that this category should be bad. We need to know when those updates are made so that we can update these products we have online to reflect the most current state of data. I could just be naive, but I don't know if that information is made publicly available to inform me when we should update that. So that's one request. And then the last two items are updating habitat layers that aren't in district products. So like hard bottom mapping, artificial reefs, tidal creeks, living shorelines. These are all layers that feed this process. I have that information where they stand now, but we also need a way to update those layers as we get more information on these different habitat types. And so who's providing us with that information? How do we ingest it? That needs to be determined. And then lastly, this is actually something that's going to be solved sooner rather than later. All of these maps and tables we've created through this workflow are going to go on our website, so you can actually see them in a place that's probably more familiar than GitHub. So I'm working with Joe Whalen, our community outreach coordinator, and Gary on what this will look like online. So look forward to that. And so that's really all I wanted to say today. Again, just reminding everybody what the HMPU is, why we need to operationalize it, and making you aware of some of those products we have now, identifying some of the needs moving forward. And I'm hoping it will be a resource you all will use. Obviously open any feedback you might have on that. And I believe I've talked way too much, so I will be quiet and take any questions.
Thank you, Marcus. Really appreciate it. Impressive bunch of work. I don't really see any questions in the chat box, but does anybody online have anything to ask?
Marcus, this is Chris Kaufman. I just had a quick question. What do you have an ability to use CAD files? Because as I was transitioning from the district to NOAA, we had begun the thought process behind each of our restoration projects trying to capture that spatial footprint. And so one way of doing that is through the as-built CAD files. Complicated, hard to work with, you have to have a CAD license. So we were going to start pushing to try to have our consultants and contractors give us a GIS layer, have them convert the CAD files to a GIS layer. I don't know what happened to that idea in terms of contracting and implementing for future projects, but most folks that are implementing restoration have as-builts. That is the footprint, and it's just wondering if maybe this group can rally around somehow getting you that spatial data in a digital format.
So I'm not familiar with CAD files. Are they like blueprints, or are they electronic formats?
So it's electronic formats that most folks don't actually see the electronic formats. The end user, the restoration practitioner, gets them in the form of the plans, the restoration plan. So it's your construction drawings are created in a proprietary software called AutoCAD.
Okay.
So, but they can, in kind of archaic ways, be, and I haven't done it, but they can be transferred or saved as GIS layers.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that format, but what I have seen just in general with open source software like ours is that probably someone's written a package to ingest that information, using some clever workaround to pull that in and skirt the proprietary requirements of having additional software to use it. But not knowing anything about that format, I don't really want to say that that's likely for sure. But I just, as a general thought, I mean, if that's a source of data that we feel like a lot of contractors have at their disposal that could be used to inform tracking of restoration projects, then I think it's worth exploring how that could be leveraged, either, you know, working into contractual language about serving up data products when the project is done, making sure that it's in a format that we could use is one way, or just even making the CAD files available. Like if we don't have the means to work with CAD files, but they're available, I would hate to just lose that information, even if we can't access it at this point in time. So maybe we just have those files available, and, you know, in the future when something comes along to allow us to use them, whether it's an open source version or we have a partner that has the ability to work with those files, then we have the data available to do that. So I mean, I'd be interested in hearing more about the possibilities of using that as a more spatially explicit approach.
Ton of suggestions in the chat, so everybody's chiming in with good info. And so now I think it's just going to be a conversation about maybe in this forum to get the practitioners or the agencies that are working with the contractors to design them to get it in contract to get these products to serve them to you. So it's just a matter of who's paying the bill, capturing it in these formats for you and passing it along. So yeah, everybody's chiming in.
All right, well, that makes me optimistic then if everyone's like, yes, we can use these in GIS. So that, I mean, that seems like a great push for this group, is to push for language in a contract to make those files available every time a restoration project is pursued. So I think that'd be great.
Yeah, Marcus, this is Will Van Gelder. To Chris's point, we do require contractually CAD files, and we convert those into layers, shape files. As you're aware, we are going through and creating our restoration database, and it will be part of any agreement moving forward that we receive these files. We get them converted internally. So, you know, obviously, we're sharing with the estuary program our activities, and we'll certainly help out any way we can. Thank you, Chris. That's a very good point.
Doug Robeson has a comment in here. Doug, do you want to talk about that, or would you like me to read it?
Hi, Gary. Yeah, just briefly, I know Marcus, you know, spent a lot of time going through the data layers, and, you know, we are dependent very much on the district's land cover, land use updates, and those are great, and they have been very helpful over the years, but, you know, they're not really resource based, as is the subtitle program the district does, seagrass and oysters and tidal flats, etc. One of the recommendations in HMPU is to update, or to maybe peel off a piece of that land use, land cover update process that would focus on the native and restorable habitats that are identified in the HMPU, and do that maybe every 2 years like the seagrass program. Now that's going to take some funding and effort, but if we really want to be consistent and really track these trends with these habitats, including freshwater wetlands and even native uplands, you know, there's still a lot of misclassifications and inconsistencies between years. And I think if it was focused more resource based, you know, we could really do a better job with tracking these trends. And so that would be my comment there.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and
Go ahead, Marcus.
just want to add on to that. Yeah, we've also had conversations about our ability to detect changes using those layers, the existing land use, land cover layers from the district, given that, you know, those are layers that are at a watershed scale. yet would that manifest, within the limits of the precision of the methods used to create those maps? Would the restoration projects that actually happen on the land really manifest to changes in those layers at a scale that we need that information in? So I think the point you bring up, Doug, is really important. If there's a way to more carefully discriminate these habitat layers, either as you call it, like peeling off some of the flux categories in the existing land use like cover layer, and then focusing on that more carefully as a means to do that. Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen how well we can track it with the existing data sets, and I think over time we'll have some answers to that.
Marcus, chiming in again. One component of that, we were brainstorming that again as I was walking out the door with the mapping team at SwiftMud. One of the things, the challenges with that is the land cover land use work has contractual minimum mapping units. So, there is a resolution within which, like you said, that they map each flux code. And so I think it is just kind of an information sharing, working directly with the folks that manage that project at the district to talk to them about your needs so that they can begin to see if it is feasible to map at a smaller resolution, at a finer resolution, which most of the data products at this point should be able to do that. But we started reviewing the data sets, the land cover data sets for our restoration footprints. And like you said, they are so small, some of them, that they do not track to the size of, of a unit that they map. So it may, like you said, take some special mapping products, but they would be the folks to coordinate with.
And this is Will again. I think it warrants an internal meeting to discuss just that, because we're going to have to, obviously come up with a really solid justification if we're talking about additional resources going to mapping efforts. I think the justification's there. We just want to make sure it's as concise and tied to resource benefits as possible. And with that, we can start that conversation.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues. There's not just the resolution at which it's mapped, but the frequency. And the district there was a period of time where the district, produced those land use land cover maps on a more frequent basis than they are now. And so I don't know if that's a question that can be revisited or not. And what's to be gained.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Emma Dantas has one in the chat. Do you want to cover that, Emma? I think it's highly related to Chris's statement about the minimum mapping unit. She's asking about how we would distinguish between living shorelines and other existing wetlands. And I think one of the issues is what we've just been discussing, is that a lot of times those living shorelines are so thin that they're not going to show up on their own. So I think we're reporting those, we're capturing them in the GIFR reports, and that's one of within the Habitat Master Plan we have a target of 1 mile of living shorelines a year, and I think that's how we can potentially start to draw some lines. Update, I think it's the FWRI's living shoreline information, but I don't. I think it is going to be difficult to have that identified within the LULC updates.
Yeah, and that's a separate layer too that is created from an alternative process there's FWRI's layer. So it wouldn't be one that's created from satellite imagery. And so that, tracking something like that is maybe less of a concern, because we know, I guess, that information is probably created through manual digitization, and the values you see in the table are just taken directly from a tally of that separate layer. So I don't think that one would fall under the challenges of resolution of other land use cover layers.
So Emma and I chatted privately back and forth about this a little bit. I think some of what she was raising spoke to some of the points that I articulated while we were drafting the plan, which is just that really the living shoreline is a tactic, but what you're measuring too is the oysters, the marshes, and the mangroves, and sort of what's the value of distinguishing there.
Thank you for that clarification, Maya. Okay, we're going to turn it. Thank you all. Thank you, Marcus. Good, definitely good stuff. Much appreciated. Going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris Kaufman from NOAA. See if I can make you. Okay, that should make you presenter, and she's going to talk about the NOAA's Hydrologic Restoration database for Tampa Bay.
Sorry, I'm clicking a bunch of buttons. Let me see if I can do this.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so you guys are seeing my first slide?
Yep.
Great. So thanks for the opportunity to share this project with you guys. I'm now I've been talking a lot from my recollection of working at the district for almost 14 years, so I apologize. My new hat is working at NOAA's Restoration Center here in the Southeast region. And I wanted to share an effort we've been working on for the last couple of years, connecting coastal waters. It is a project an initiative where we are not only designing, constructing, implementing restoration, but we are also planning for future hydrologic restoration in the Gulf. So background on the effort, Connecting Coastal Waterways, like I said, is focused on hydrologic restoration projects where structures and human alteration has blocked or diminished the natural flowways of a watershed. And so we identified 6 priority projects across the Gulf. And those projects were funded through the Restore Council's original funding priority 1 list back in 2015. So like I said, it's a Gulf-wide initiative, and it's focused in 3 states, Texas, Florida, and Alabama. And another component of the project is not just putting these 6 projects in the ground, but is also planning for future restoration or identifying future hydrologic projects to be funded by, say, the Restore Council or any other funding entity. So maybe the next generation of Connecting Coastal Waterways or Restore hydrologic restoration projects. And so I'm going to focus on the planning component of CCW. And so the planning component really is just made up of hydrologic restoration project inventory for each of the watersheds that we are working in currently to implement a project. And this builds on a 2011 product by Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant and the NOAA RC. And so that was kind of the jumping off point for identifying projects, and then also kind of the model for building the new inventory. And so hydrologic restoration means something a little different across the Gulf of Mexico. And so when Sea Grant and NOAA were working on the original 2011 product, they all came to an agreement that the definition of hydro restoration for the project was remove or modify the barriers to restore historic estuarine and freshwater flows in exchange to benefit the coastal habitats and fisheries. So the exact language of this is not always reflected in the types of actions that we take here in Florida, and that is generally understood, that while we are trying to restore historic flows, it may not be in the exact same footprint, it may not be in the exact same ways, but this is kind of the general umbrella for hydrologic restoration. But I've been a very vocal advocate about how we here in Florida actually apply and implement projects or apply this concept. So just very quickly, here are the watersheds or water bodies of interest for the Connecting Coastal Waters projects. So in Texas, they'll be looking at Galveston Bay, Matagorda Bay, and Laguna Madre. They're doing Their project is mostly focused on minimum flows and levels and connecting their estuarine and lagoonal systems to improve flushing. And so up in Mobile Bay and in Money Bayou up in Apalachicola Bay in Florida are shallow water crossings. So roadways that are causing barriers, hydrologic connection barriers for properties in those two areas. And then, of course, Tampa Bay is a watershed of interest because the project that is being funded, Restore Council is giving NOAA and our partner NIFWIF almost $1.8 million to implement phase 2 of the Robinson Preserve project. So to focus on the inventory, pretty easy development process. So essentially the way we're building the inventory, our contractor just started with basic data mining. So mined the data sets of available restoration inventories across the Gulf. With the DWH spill, there were quite a few portals available. So, but a lot of this information is getting old. So we started with the 2011 inventory from Sea Grant, with the projects that were available in the trustee Gulf Spill Restoration Portal, in each of the state's own project portals that are still being updated, and then reviewing each watershed's available regional restoration plans. So that would be for Tampa Bay. They looked at the swim plan. They looked at the time, it was the final draft Habitat Master Plan update, as well as like the Little Manatee River restoration plan. And so that information was narrowly focused to the concept of hydrologic restoration projects. And then that list was then brought to the next phase. And so real quickly before I go on to the next step, here's an example of the Sea Grant inventory. So this is still a live resource on the internet. And so you can see that there's projects throughout Tampa Bay and further south into Charlotte Harbor that were included in the inventory. And some of these were actually funded once the inventory was created by Mississippi Sea Grant. And, you know, since 2011, a lot of these projects have come off the table as being completed. So that's why we looked to the other data portals. And so next, we needed updated information. So with our long short list of projects, we brought them to Gary and Ed at the Estuary program were super helpful in kind of giving us and helping us do the first cut of projects that were still viable or they thought were still viable, and gave us the project lead contact information to reach out to the partners who were leading these potential projects. And so we simply created a form to collect updated project information. And so here is all of the information that we collected on projects. Important components of it were the status of engineering design, if any work had been conducted, estimates for those costs, and the age or the date of those costs. Because as we're finding, as you reach back into these older project inventories to look for viable projects for, say, DWH or Restore dollars, like I said, they're getting old and their construction estimates, probable cost estimates are getting old and are often underestimating the total cost that it would be today to do those projects. So tracking that information is important. Also scalability, and can projects be phased for benefit, you know, for cost benefits or funding competitiveness. And then something important that Marcus touched on that is important for hydrologic restoration projects is we're trying to get a handle on not only the footprint of the project site where work is being implemented, but also if project partners are considering the larger scale or the broader benefits of the project by altering or improving flows. There are often downstream or even upstream benefits. And so trying to capture in a quantifiable way, at this point just estimated, the impact of that project and the connection, those hydrologic connections. And And so obviously there's a whole other set of questions that kind of focus on the benefits of the work. And for NOAA, the Restoration Center, we are also particularly focused on not only the habitat types that will benefit, but the fisheries that will benefit. And so this is the stage where I was going to just show you where we're at. The next step in the process is to driving while talking is hard. There we go. Next step is we have the spreadsheet of projects. So we got feedback from our partners or from the project leads. Thank you to everybody that took time to fill out the little form. And if you have project ideas, it's not that bad. It's only like 2-sentence answers. So if you'd like to contribute a project, I might be able to sneak more in. But we currently have a list of 21 projects for the Tampa Bay watershed. And we have it in this spreadsheet format that I can share out to those if everyone wants to take a final look at what the information looks like. If you want to quality control your entry, it's literally copy and paste from the forms that people submitted. And this is now being converted into a web-based app. So it's going to be, this spreadsheet will be static. Hopefully maybe we can update it over time, but it's planned to be a static product with a map viewer. So this will be available to the public. And just wanted to kind of share it out for everybody to take a look, for any partners that we weren't able to reach that have hydrologic restoration projects that they would like to get on the list, and just to potentially discuss with folks the utility of this product. 5+ years ago, the intent was maybe this would be the next generation of CCW projects. The way Restore Council is selecting projects has changed slightly, and so that may or may not be the intent of this product. And so I think we as a community can decide how we would like to use this. Funding lists or project lists in need of funding is something that that is always helpful to have. And if funding becomes available to the federal government through appropriations for restoration, these are the sorts of things we go to. So it's up to you as the community to decide maybe where you would like to take this next, and if it's a resource for the group. And one thought was to prioritize this list, or to do something of that nature to share out with potential funders. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I got a statement from Jessica that the link in the Google folder is not working right now. So I don't know what's wrong with that. I'll have a look at it later. But
so the link in the PowerPoint presentation may not work. That was a link for myself, and it was to a Google Doc that is not, to a Google Sheet that's not shared. But Gary has the product, has the standalone spreadsheet. So maybe if that's the link she was talking about, that is a dead link.
So this is, I just posted a link to a PDF in our shared Google folder where all the Habitat Restoration Committee documents are. Chris, do you want me to go ahead and put the spreadsheet in there, the active spreadsheet in there as well, so people can input?
Sure.
Or? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. What I would say is I probably won't monitor it unless someone wants to share with me that there's an edit or a change that needs to be made. So if you could contact me directly, but I can go back and check on it periodically. But please, reach out to me if you have a project you want to add, and I can get you one of those little forms to fill out. It doesn't take a long time, or we can get on a phone call and fill it out. And if you have edits, I will take those as well. But if you could email me those, that might be the most efficient way.
Chris, can you just restate why the federal government puts these lists together and why people should make the time to input their information in there, because I think we get a lot of these requests from the other agencies too, and I think it's a little confusing to folks, you know, down here at the local level. So
Yes, so it's a black box. It goes into a black hole. Someone asks you for information the next day, have to have it now, and then you never hear or see from them again. I have been the recipient of that, and I have been tasked with getting that information and sending it into a black hole, never to hear about it again. But from my staff level perspective, how it's used is we get taskers, we get asks from anybody in the federal government, generally Congress, you know, someone associated with Congress, that wants project ideas for legislation they're working on, or generally for legislation they're working on. And so we get these asks. It comes to us at the staff level to reach out to our local partners to find out what on-the-ground information is available and what on-the-ground practitioners or resource managers either know about their system, have the status of their system, or have project needs. So we come to you with a project need, we ask for it within a week, it goes in the spreadsheet, and we send it off into that black hole of somebody in Congress asked for this. So that happens. It's, you know, the flurry has happened around the infrastructure bill last year when they started, or 2 years ago now maybe, when they started talking about it. We have no control over how those processes work except to provide Congress and staffers that information to help them develop ideas and means of who to send money to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, to NOAA, to make some of this restoration happen, or to take infrastructure money and send it to NOAA to do a restoration project. So it's really often information gathering. But if we don't create those, I don't know that we would necessarily miss out, but there is the potential to not, if we don't show the need and don't get on the list for consideration. So yeah, we use it to fund programs at the high level and then to come back to you guys with grant opportunities, essentially. So hopefully, you know, that amount of time, maybe 2 to 5 years later, will result in a grant competition we can bring you that you can submit the project to and get money. That's my small world view of it in the federal government.
Thank you so much, Chris. Anybody else with comments or questions for Chris right now? I put the link to the Excel sheet in the chat. So hearing none, seeing nothing else on the chat right now, we're to the open discussion announcements part of the afternoon. You know, part of your I'd start to request suggestions for topics at the next meeting, if anybody has any. As I mentioned, GIPRA, the government, speaking about one of the black boxes, the Government Performance Results Act is something we do for EPA. However, we've been very proactive over the past many years to make sure that this restoration data that y'all provide to us goes into the Water Atlas restoration database. And we've got a really nice story map up now that shows a lot of the habitat restoration, shows the habitat restoration projects that have been put out there. And this will feed into the work that Marcus was talking about within tracking of the Habitat Master Plan. In case you haven't seen the announcement yet, there's an open call for abstracts for the October 18 to 22nd Basis 7 Association of NEPs meeting. So please consider submitting a habitat restoration or other abstract for the meeting. Jessica asked to mention that the Regional Planning Council has a Regional Resiliency Action Plan draft out and available right now, and I put the link in the agenda. I think they're asking for review by the end of the month.
And we'll be hearing a presentation, having a discussion on those items at the next TAC meeting in June.
Thank you, Maya. And then, you know, just a a reminder, if you can email me with suggestions for co-chairs for this consortium, we will reconvene on September 1st to discuss those. Please don't blindly, please don't volunteer anybody without letting them know that they're volunteered, just because. Does anybody appreciate all your attention during this time? Does anybody else have anything to discuss, any topics right now off the top of your head that might be interesting for the September 1 meeting? Or anything else that they would like to discuss for the good of the group? Okay, hearing Maya did put the link for the basis abstract in the chat box as well. Thank you all so much for your time. We're ending about half an hour early, so we'll give you that bit of your life back, and hopefully we will see you again on September 1st. Thank you so much.